everyone. Welcome to The Breakdown. I'm Diane Macedo.
And I'm Terry Moran. Search and rescue efforts are underway in Louisiana after Ida slammed the Gulf Coast as a Category 4 hurricane with winds up to 150 miles per hour. Now the South is dealing with the aftermath. At least one person has died and the death toll is expected to rise. President Biden met virtually today with governors and the FEMA administrator to coordinate the federal response. We've got the latest from the storm zone.
And the Pentagon says there is still time for Americans to be evacuated from Afghanistan before tomorrow's troop withdrawal deadline. But the threat of more potential terror attacks in the Kabul airport is very real. After a suicide bombing killed 13 service member, ISIS-K is now claiming responsibility for a rocket attack on the airport. Meanwhile, U.S. officials say they thwarted that rocket attack and launched an airstrike on a vehicle known to be an imminent ISIS-K threat. We have the latest on the race to escape Afghanistan.
And at least 9 states around the country have laws or executive orders prohibiting mask mandates in classrooms. But now the Department of Education is opening civil rights investigations into 5 of them, exploring whether those bans discriminate against students who are at higher risk of becoming seriously ill from COVID-19. We're going to hear from the Secretary of Education on why he thinks this move is necessary.
But we begin with the Gulf Coast now dealing with the aftermath of Ida. The storm made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane with winds up to 150 miles per hour. New Orleans officials have urged anyone who left the area not to come back yet as they struggle with damage, power outages, and even issues with 911 and the drinking water. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze is in New Orleans right now. And Elizabeth, we heard the mayor there speak just a little while ago saying that a few buildings have collapsed. There is debris everywhere, but the levees have held. So it's not the worst case scenario, but how bad is it?
Well, it's pretty bad around the city just when you look at the damage on the streets, Diane. There are a lot of trees that are down. They are blocking the roads. There's a lot of debris that has flown into streets. As we were out here all throughout the storm, we saw signs come off of buildings. We saw roofs start to be torn up. These were really powerful wind gusts that were tearing through the city, and that's what they're trying to deal with right now as they're starting to recover. I will say the mayor absolutely said not a worst case scenario, of course, referring to Hurricane Katrina, which was 16 years ago. She pointed out the fact that the flood systems held up, and we've been watching the Mississippi River. It is right behind us. We watched as that flood level was rising all throughout the storm. It was rising rapidly. We got a lot of rain here in a very short time, but the floodwater has already come back down. Those gates outside, they were never forced to be open. So that is one positive sign here as the recovery from this storm starts. But really what is complicating the effort here now, Diane, is the fact that almost the entire city is still without power. It is making it very difficult to communicate. It's making it very difficult to get in touch with people, and that's something that's not just in New Orleans. It is across the state with, a 1 million+ power outages. That's something that's really going to take time, and it's something that the officials are warning about here, Diane.
And Elizabeth, is there any estimate on how long take time really means? How long can people be without power there?
Well, they are telling us it's going to be a day, and it could be even weeks. And that is a huge amount of time when we're talking about search and rescue efforts. Down in Jefferson Parish, they were talking about some people in the attics unable to get out. There is pretty heavy heat now. That is not a situation that can last for long. And if they are not able to get in touch with people because power is down, because communications are out, a lot of the cell service is still gone here. A lot of our crew members still don't have cell reception. That's a problem for trying to get these people who need to be rescued. And that's certainly something that the governor is pointing to, all the local officials are pointing to. Hopefully that they can start kind of getting these power, there's a lot of backup generators going. I will say, when you're walking around the streets here, the main thing that you hear, Diane, is the sound of backup power generators. So there are some systems in place to keep kind of the bare necessities going, but obviously when it comes to this massive effort that's going to be needed out of the wake of the storm, we're still really waiting to see what the damage will be because we just don't know because of some of these outages that are in place.
And Elizabeth, we're also hearing that the power problems are now creating potential issues with the drinking water.
Yeah, so far, that's a concern. They actually are telling residents here in New Orleans to conserve how much water they're using. That's also a power issue, too, of course. I can tell you in our hotel, there is no water right now. There's really a conservation effort going on. Of course, the big concern would be contamination, and that would be something that would lead to another crisis on top of this existing devastation that we're seeing. Generally, the tone that we're hearing is just caution. Please take the measures that are needed. If you rode out this storm, if you stayed here, please continue continue to be careful is what the officials are saying, because the danger is just not gone yet, Diane.
And Elizabeth, there are so many communities south of New Orleans that are under a lot of water right now. What's the latest on those areas?
Yeah, so we know that the Coast Guard is starting to kind of give us the first glimpses of what those rescue efforts are like. Some of the problems with those communities is that there is one road in or out, and those roads are flooded. The homes are flooded. There was really a lot of rainfall as part of this storm, and that makes it really hard to get to those communities that were hit really hard. We've heard some reports of some levees breaking outside of the kind of New Orleans center here, and that's obviously a major concern. That would bring back some bad memories to Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago. So that we know, ultimately they have got a lot of people on the ground. They do say here that they are prepared for this storm. That's something that the president has also said. President Biden said as many preparations as possible were taken in advance of this effort. But ultimately, it's going to take time. This is something that is a very serious, storm. We can't really discount the damage that has been done here. And we are just starting to get the first glimpses right now.
All right, Elizabeth Schulze in New Orleans for us. Thanks, Elizabeth. Stay safe.
And for more on recovery efforts, let's go to Kenneth Moten. He's live inside FEMA's Operations Center here in Washington, D.C. Kenneth, so what's the latest on the recovery efforts from there right now?
Well, Terry, every second is critical. No one knows that better than the officials on the ground impacted by Ida and the people here in this room at FEMA headquarters. Take a look behind me. Rows and rows of people, officials, people from government agencies, law enforcement, people who have been through this before with other catastrophic storms. We know that the FEMA administrator has called this one of the most catastrophic storms to make landfall. And so here at this nerve center for the federal coordination and response, we see these people behind me working really around the clock to make sure to help the people in the Gulf State area. President Biden was in this room yesterday to receive a briefing ahead of the storm. The president at the White House today received another briefing. Just moments ago, he was speaking with those mayors and governors from the Gulf states you just mentioned at the top of the show there. He received those briefings from them and, yes, heard that the levees held. Also gave a report that he has asked the FAA to authorize surveillance drone flight to assess the damage there, and also says that the FCC is working with cell phone providers to try to get communications up and running for residents. We heard Elizabeth Schulze there say the communications, that is a big issue. So for people who are trying to get in touch with loved ones, for those who are trying to call out, potentially needing help, getting those communications up is extremely important there. The president also saying that more than 20 federal agencies are helping, including Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense. But I can say that it is the work here done at FEMA that is the most critical, especially in the aftermath of this storm. Pardon the list of numbers here, Terry, but I want to give you the sheer force of the federal response here. More than a dozen urban search and rescue teams of about 1,000 people assisting with those water rescues. 3,500 National Guard troops from across the country have been activated, deployed to the region. Nearly 4,000 FEMA employees deployed to 6 states, including Louisiana, Mississippi, where we know that at least 1 million people are in the dark. Also, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they've got this special temporary power team that is on the ground there, which is helping provide electricity, that crucial power to public facilities that need it, like those hospitals as well. Dozens of ambulances and medical service providers are there for evacuation help as well. Meals, water, generators, all of those necessities being provided by FEMA, Terry.
And that is a massive response, Kenneth, on the day after. But this one looks to be one that is going to go on for a while, with the power out for so many people in such a huge area, with the impact that that'll have on water and all kinds of other services. So what is FEMA looking at as the job going down the road?
Well, just minutes ago, Terry, I spoke with officials here at this FEMA headquarters, and they say that they believe this recovery will take some time. We're talking about months, if not longer, but they say they will be there as long as it takes. And we have compared this storm, the people on the ground have compared this storm to Katrina. And we know that when it comes to Katrina, one of the worst to hit that area, to hit the U.S., this is, as they compare these storms here, we know that it's that storm and all the storms in between that have impacted the federal response. And they say they've learned from Katrina all the storms in between, and that is why you're seeing the force of the federal government there and the power of the federal government to help the people in the Gulf states there. And so they know that, and that's why providing those necessities, the meals, the water, the generator as well, and also giving tips. Crucial tips that you would think that are common sense tips, but they still can lead to more deaths in the aftermath of this storm. And so they're asking people to make sure you don't have your generator running inside your home, that you keep it away from your home. Make sure you check on your neighbors if you can. All of those things to help the people out, because we know it's not just the storm itself that can impact lives, it's the aftermath as well.
That's a great point there, Kenneth. And having covered Katrina, it did look like in that storm, which was overwhelming, the FEMA had a long way to go. And it's good to hear that from your perspective, they're getting on it. Kenneth Moten here at the FEMA Operations Center in Washington. Thanks.
For more on where Ida is headed, let's bring in WABC meteorologist Brittany Bell for the latest forecast. Hi, Brittany. What are you seeing now?
Well, right now, the center that continues to move throughout central Mississippi, and central Mississippi will continue to get just heavy rainfall throughout the afternoon. Also, southern Alabama and the Florida Panhandle under the gun with heavy rain and that threat for tornadoes. We still have a tornado watch that will last throughout the afternoon as well. The latest track from the National Hurricane Center shows that Ida will continue to move to the northeast. It's going to make its way into Kentucky and West Virginia on Wednesday and Thursday, moving into the mid-Atlantic states and also into Pennsylvania, bringing heavy rain. Speaking of heavy rain, timing things out later this afternoon, that axis of widespread rainfall shifts into North Mississippi, still really coming down around midnight. Even into Alabama, you'll still have to watch out for that threat for isolated tornadoes. Central Tennessee, you'll start to get more rainfall by Tuesday afternoon, and this is on top of the heavy rain, that flooding event that you just had over a week ago. Rainfall totals ranging between 2 to 4 inches, and that's the lower end. That could by itself cause enough issues. 2 to 4 possible in Birmingham, Montgomery, 4 to 6 along Jackson and east towards Tupelo. Heading into Tuesday and Wednesday, and by Thursday, that rain threat shifts into the northeast. You can see futurecasts showing widespread rainfall and still potential for a few isolated tornadoes. We already have a flash flood watch out all the way into Pennsylvania and New Jersey right now, and that's because we are anticipating that threat for additional rainfall and flooding. So rainfall totals 2 to 4 inches possible in Washington, D.C., Hartford. At Pittsburgh, too, you maybe could get closer to 4 to 6, but 4 to 6 as well could fall, stretching from New York all the way down to Philadelphia and Charleston. Spots near northern West Virginia could get over 6 inches of rainfall. So even though this will continue to weaken, we don't want to get too caught up in the name, because the impacts will be widespread through the end of the week.
All right. Don't want to get too confident there.
Yeah.
Brittany, thank you.
Well, the Pentagon says there is still time for Americans to be evacuated from Afghanistan before tomorrow's deadline. More than 122,000 people have been evacuated as of today, including 5,400 American citizens. So let's go to ABC News political director Rick Klein for more on this continuing crisis that is on the president's desk every day. Rick, an ABC News and Ipsos poll, as you know, it shows that more than 8 in 10 Americans think U.S. troops should remain in Afghanistan until all Americans are evacuated, and just over 7 in 10 think they should stay until all Afghans who helped the United States are evacuated as well. That's likely not going to happen. So what's at stake for President Biden as he stands by his decision to pull out?
Yeah, Terry, there's been an acknowledgement from the White House that it's not going to happen. All Americans won't be out, and it is certain that all Afghans who helped the U.S. mission over some 2 decades will not be out. What's interesting about those numbers, Terry, is they hold firm almost precisely across party lines. Democrats, Republicans, Independents all believe firmly that there should be a continued U.S. troop presence. That, of course, isn't happening. Tomorrow is that deadline, and as we tick down the moments, the hours until then, every effort is being made to try to evacuate as many Americans and as many Afghans who helped the American cause as possible, though there is an acknowledgement that there are going to have to be work done after August 31st when U.S. troops are no longer there. We've already seen the deteriorating security situation that resulted or helped contribute to the awful terrorist attack last week that killed well more than a dozen service members. We know that it's going to be even more difficult after that. The moment that the Taliban is in full control of the country doesn't mean that they actually have operational security control. We saw that, again, evidenced last week, and it is going to be a very difficult situation for those who are left behind.
And Rick, now that we've seen this terrorist attack that killed 13 U.S. service members, these rocket attacks that the U.S. says they were able to thwart, on the one hand, some are saying that there will be a reckoning for Biden over this. On the other, I wonder if there might be some increased support as people start to realize how dangerous it is there.
Yeah, well, it's clear that the anti-terrorism mission and the threat posed by terrorists is still a real one. We've heard from military officials throughout the day today who are trying to emphasize that in their view, so far, ISIS-K does not have capabilities beyond Afghanistan. But of course, that is a concern. It has to be a concern. And it's a reminder that the U.S. is going to continue to have to fight in Afghanistan, even if it's in targeted ways, even if it's via drones. The over-the-horizon presence that we've seen used a few times already, that has implications as well. Reports on the ground of civilian casualties in the attack yesterday that the American side believes definitely saved U.S. lives. So it will continue to be a challenge for the United States some 20 years after 9/11 to be continuing anti-terrorism operations in Afghanistan. It seems like that is unavoidable.
And let's bring in our senior Pentagon reporter, Louis Martinez. Louis, there's an ancient adage that says the most dangerous thing for an army to do is retreat. That is what we're doing. Pentagon acknowledging these final hours of withdrawal are particularly dangerous. So what are their biggest concerns as the last Americans leave Afghanistan?
No, you're right, Terry. The biggest concern is ensuring the safety of all these troops as they are leaving, because that's when you're most vulnerable. You are reducing your size to smaller numbers, and then that means that your tactical power is less. So that means you have additional planes in the sky providing what they call overwatch, combat air support, ensuring that in case something happens, that there is a deterrence up above. You have these CRAMs that we've heard about. These are anti-rocket systems that last night intercepted at least one of these rockets that was launched at the airport in Kabul. Having systems like that is very important because as you reduce the troop numbers, your eyes, your visibility on the ground is reduced. And all of that means this is a truly dangerous situation as you withdraw troops. But I think one of the ways that you mitigate that is by working with people who used to be your enemies, in this case, the Taliban. Today, we heard Pentagon spokesman John Kirby confirm that there have been discussions with the Taliban about this withdrawal process to ensure that there are no miscalculations on the part of the Taliban as the United States military withdraws from the airport over the coming days. That is very significant because it implies that the process is winding down, and they want to ensure that as the last troops leave over the coming days, that they are safe and secure.
And Louis, the U.S. launched this airstrike on what they called an imminent threat, a vehicle with explosives inside. Now the Pentagon's acknowledging reports of civilian casualties from that. What can you tell us?
Right. This goes back to those concerns about a potential imminent ISIS attack that came out on late Saturday night. That warning from the State Department was highly specific, warning American citizens to remove themselves from any of the 3 gates that were still open at that time. Very dangerous situation. About 12 hours later, we understand that this drone targeted this vehicle. These individuals, 2 men who were spotted loading explosives into a car, potentially to make it a car bomb, potentially loading suicide vests that could be used among the crowds that are continuing to gather outside of the airport in Kabul. They were seen, and if weapons were dropped, munitions were dropped on this vehicle, and there was the first explosion, and then there's something else called a secondary explosion, which means that there were other explosives in that vehicle. Apparently, it was that second explosion that created damage to the surrounding area and led to potentially the deaths of as many as 10 civilians, including 4 children. The Pentagon is acknowledging that there were potentially civilian casualties as a result of this, but we're seeing from local reports on the ground, from local press, that yes, there were as many as 10 civilians that were killed. As we heard from the Pentagon today, the U.S. military goes to great lengths to try to minimize any potential civilian casualties, ensuring that the bomb radius is not going to impact buildings, is not going to impact civilians. But you also heard Pentagon Secretary John Kirby acknowledge that when something like this happens, essentially, it's imminent. You have to make a game call. And I think in this case, maybe they decided that the threat was greater than the potential for civilian casualties, even though they go to great lengths to ensure that that does not happen. But they're not blaming the missile. They're blaming the secondary explosion.
The final days of U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan, the most dangerous there. Louis Martinez, the Pentagon, and Rick Klein, our political director. Thanks.
And as Louis just reported at today's Pentagon briefing, Press Secretary John Kirby reiterated that the U.S. is still coordinating with the Taliban on evacuations to, quote, avoid misinterpretations ahead of tomorrow's withdrawal. Our next guest is from Afghanistan, and at age 17, she became the youngest and first female provincial council member in the country's history. Serena Faizi, thank you so much for being here. First, Serena, I know that you left Afghanistan in 2019, but your family escaped just a few days ago, right before that deadly terror attack. What was that like, and how are you all doing right now?
Thank you so much first for having me here in that show. And other than that, yes, I did left my country in 2019, but my family just left like 2 weeks before. It was not an easy process. The way the video that we have, it's on the social media. It looks really scary. It's scary than facing that, by themselves. The way I was in touch with them, the signal was not working and there was not any connection. It is a really for me that was a really horrible and terrible experience. And for them, even though I was safe here and just being in touch with them to get the updates, that was really frustrating myself, and I wasn't even able to sleep for 2 weeks until they got out of there. So what about them who was there without having any food, without having any access to the clean air or clean water? And the day that they moved to a different base from that area where there was a bomb, in the second day there was a big bomb. So we lost a lot of people from both sides. The people who were there to save Afghan people and the Afghan people who were asking for the sake of safety.
And Serena, you were young, or perhaps very young, when the United States moved into Afghanistan in 2001. There you are with the first president after that, Hamid Karzai. We're seeing that picture. So the deadline for the U.S. withdrawal, the final withdrawal of U.S. troops, is just 1 day away now. What are your thoughts about the next Afghanistan? And do you have family, friends still there trying to leave? What are they facing?
I do have friends and families and my colleagues, they all are, reaching out to me, and they think that the way I took my family out, and I also help some other family that are in the process, to get out of there. They think that I can help all of them, but it's impossible for me to do that. Not even I don't have even my documents here in America, how I would be able to help them with nothing. But I'm trying to give them as much as moral possibility I can have, or give them the positive energy, but it's nothing is going to affect them right now. Nothing is going to give them a hope and any kind of help other than they're just waiting for the miracle to happen. Regarding working in the really young age with the government and being elected provincial council member in Afghanistan, especially in Kandahar city, which used to be, and maybe again, it's going to be the capital of Taliban. That was not easy, but I would say whatever we worked so hard since the 20 years with all those, bombs and insecurity, and still we put ourselves in the risk, nothing. It's right now equal to nothing. And people are asking for safety, for help. But which kind of help right now? How long we're going to take people out of Afghanistan? Until there is one Afghan man or female, Afghanistan is going to be Afghanistan, and will still, need a sake of safety. The Afghanistan land need to be safe.
And I know you've also been outspoken in your fight for women's rights. So what do you think is at stake for women in Afghanistan now that the Taliban have taken over?
Well, it seems right now, so far that I'm following up the conference from Taliban side so far that they had in Kabul, Afghanistan, they keep saying that, we respect women's rights and we're going to give them rights which Sharia law says. But which kind of Sharia law? The Sharia law that they made up and they call it Sharia law? Because fight is not over, it should not be over Afghan men. And the Sharia law is not just, Islam is not just for a female, it's for men too. The definition of the Sharia law, they need to explain that to the international, Muslim, countries and the Muslim, consuls that are working on that, in that step, in that part. because again, they push a lot of, women to stop their work. They're not allowing. I have a contact with a lot of, people back there, especially females. They keep saying that we went to the job to get a job, like, to start our job back. But they said, you cannot work right now, go back to your homes. And the school is right now for women. They changed the rules. First, they said no schooling. Right now, they say until to 7th grade, they can go to the school as a female. So it is all risky. And people are afraid, honestly speaking. Afghan people, even though they give like a little bit of freedom, like the schooling, the 7 years, like until to 7 years, they can study until to 7th grade. People are not going to let girls to go out, because what happened in some of the provinces, they took the girls out of their houses, their, places, and where they are, nobody knows. People cannot speak up from Afghanistan right now here because everybody is banned. And if they speak up about those kind of, issues, the ground information to let the international community know about that, they're going to be killed, and everybody want to live their life.
Serena, can they reimpose that version of their vision of society under their version of Islam on a country that has changed so much? The Taliban has made these vague public promises to protect women's rights. Taliban 2.0, they're calling it. You were a politician in Afghanistan. The country's changed so much. Can they get away with that? Can they do it again?
If the international community take out the focus from that area, from Afghanistan, of course they would take advantage of that, and they will do whatever they want to do with, not just with the women, regarding all things, always, all the achievement that we had as Afghan. And in Afghanistan we had. But here is the thing. If they really believed on the change and there was any changes from Taliban side, why so far we did not see any woman in a peace talk from Taliban side that give us as Afghan women the confidence that yes, they have been changed regarding women. And seeing their reaction, the way they came and the way they said that they had a deal with the government of Afghanistan and the international community that they're going to take over all provinces, but they're not going to come to Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. But what they did, in 2 weeks, they came and they took over all over Afghanistan. And they forced the government to leave everything. So it means, personally and professionally, me as Afghan, I will never trust them, and I don't trust them. Whatever they say, they react in a different way. Whatever they react, and they say something different. Right now, they're trying to pretend and represent themselves really nice and beautiful picture to the international community. But in the reality, they are not. They don't know even how to react with a human being, even though with the men, how they were from, years and years, they were in the mountains. They say that from their own, mouth, in their own words, that we were in the mountains, nothing. And right now they're like animals, worse than animals. Right now they're in the country, inside of the country with the human beings. How they're going to react, how they're going to act, who knows? We are not just talking right now about just the head of the Taliban, like Mullah Brother and his team who was, in different countries and have at least a little bit, he have seen some females or something. We are talking about the ground people, the Taliban, that are the large amount of them. Not all of them they don't know even how to behave with the local people. People are being beaten in their roadway just because they shave, just because they're not having a full covered hijab.
All right, Serena Faizi, it's a pleasure to have you today. Good luck to you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, the Department of Education has opened an investigation into 5 states trying to determine if statewide mask bans violated the civil rights of students. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona will join us to explain why right after the break. Stay with us.
Well, the battle over masks continues to escalate. Today, the Department of Education, through its own Civil Rights Division, has opened investigations into 5 states, Iowa, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Utah, to determine whether statewide mask bans in those states may have violated the civil rights of their students. This signals a major escalation by the federal government in the battle over masks at schools, and it raises really important questions of law and justice in our schools. So for more on this, I'm happy to say we're joined by the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. Secretary Cardona, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
And first, let's just tell us about this investigation you're announcing today. How does a statewide ban on mask mandates for schools, how does that violate student civil rights, people might ask?
Over the last year and a half, I've spoken to parents across the country who have told me that they fear for their children's safety. And we know vulnerable populations of students, especially students with disabilities, benefit from in-person learning like all students do. But with this particular group, we have health risks that are associated with COVID-19 that could be prevented. And we believe that the ban on local control to decide how to safely reopen schools does put students at risk. So we're going to investigate that.
All right. And so under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Education Rights Act, these policies, the argument goes, are denying an equal access to education for those students with disability. And you've called those anti-mask policies negligent. You said they're putting kids in harm's way. You just say, so if kids are really in danger, is there more you can do at this point beyond opening an investigation at the federal level?
We continue to communicate with states to share with them the best practices from across the country. We're advocating for local decision-making with health experts as partners to reopen schools. We know that's what works. So when we have politics getting in the way of things, unfortunately, students are ending up not going to school because their parents don't feel comfortable sending them to school. We feel that's a violation, and we feel that all students should have access to in-person learning across the country in a manner that's safe. I mean, look at the data with this Delta variant. We need to take every precaution to give students the best opportunity to learn in person.
Well, Secretary Cardona, this is, very well, this is a subject matter that has just ignited a level of rage and fury in certain parts of the country that is scary and almost dangerous, verges on violence, it sounds like sometimes, people targeting school board members and the like. Are you concerned that the big stick of the federal government being waved around here could basically, to mix metaphors, pour gasoline on that fire? Are you concerned that you're stoking that?
We really need to keep the politics out of it. We need to do what we know is safe for students. To me, this is about protecting students, protecting our staff. That's what this is about. And the president said, use every tool in your toolbox to make sure we're providing a safe school reopening, and that's what we're doing. At this point, the data is clear. Our health experts, in partnership with our school leaders, they know what to do. We need to keep politics out of it and let the experts in the schoolhouses and in the doctors do what they do best. We need to keep politics out of it.
All right. Well, you're right in the middle of it. Florida, as you know, is not on the list that you announced today because a mask ban there was just overturned by a judge, although it's currently being appealed. And you've clashed with Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis repeatedly over masks. I want to read you some of his reasoning, what Governor DeSantis says his reasoning was for the mask ban at a press conference last week. He said, quote, "If a kid was infected this summer, that kid does not need to be in a mask no matter what you think of the mask. That has immunity. And so if you're not recognizing that basic, clear scientific fact at this point, that shows you that this is more political. You're not following the science." That's Ron DeSantis essentially, challenging what you're saying here. How do you answer him?
I want to work with Governor DeSantis and every other governor across the country to do what's right for our students. And, the students in Florida are my students, too. But at the end of the day, I'm going to trust medical doctors and health experts who do this for a living to guide our safe school reopening. As I said before, we need to keep the politics out of it. This isn't about politics. This is bigger than Governor DeSantis. This is bigger than Secretary Cardona. This is about protecting students and giving them the opportunity to learn in person where they learn best.
But Secretary Cardona, people feel that you are wielding the power of the federal government here. You faced some criticism for saying that schools will be safe if adults, quote, just do their job. And your critics say basically that a handful of states aren't doing that already and more needs to be done to protect students. So do you think these investigations are likely to change anything, or are we just doomed to be in this locked battle over this piece of cloth?
I do believe that we're going to get through this. Unfortunately, looking at the data trends across the country, in those places that are more relaxed about the mitigation strategies, we're seeing more hospitalizations. we really need to protect our students. We need to come together as a country and do what's right for our students. They suffered enough. And I believe our role at the Department of Education is to lift up best practice, to make sure we have clear guidance, and to make sure we're supporting our students, their opportunity to go to school in person.
They've suffered enough. You know, this morning I got to walk my 3 youngest children to public school here in the district, and the feeling was just, it was wonderful. Parents, kids, everybody was happy to be back. What are you doing as this Delta variant surges to make sure schools stay safe and stay open? That's what really the underlying concern was today, for all the joy.
And I'm glad to hear that. And I think, you know, it's stories like that and experiences like that that make us sacrifice a little bit more so that we can make sure our children get to school in person and not have disrupted learning. We have the Return to School roadmap with more information, and we're keeping a close eye on this Delta variant. This Delta variant is different than last year's COVID-19. So we know it spreads more easily. So we have to do those strategies that we know worked last year to reopen schools and continue to monitor it. At the end of the day, we want to protect our students.
Absolutely. And masks help, obviously, but they aren't a silver bullet. We know that in schools, ventilation would help. And so many schools have been built without proper ventilation, perhaps to save energy costs. Just opening the windows could make a huge difference. Well, what else is being done along those lines and others to lower the risk in schools as that Delta variant moves through the country?
You know, you're absolutely right. We've learned so much in this past year. Last year, when we were reopening schools across the country, we didn't have the benefit of vaccines. So I'm encouraging everyone who's eligible to get a vaccine. We didn't have the rapid COVID-19 testing that we have now. We didn't have a year's worth of information that we have now. We know what works. We know that good ventilation works, masking, vaccination, and the American Rescue Plan provides funds for these things to happen. I recently visited a school in DeKalb County in Georgia that revamped their ventilation system to have better airflow. So there are so many good practices across the country. It's our job as the education department to lift those and to make sure that the resources are available so students can have a chance to get back into the classroom.
And yet, for some reason, this has become the political battleground right now, despite the fact stuff like that case study came out on Friday from the CDC showing that a single teacher took off their masks to read aloud to a class and ended up infecting about half the class with COVID. Now, if that doesn't persuade people, if those kinds of real-life examples doesn't persuade people that masks help, you know, do you ever despair?
You know, listen, I don't like wearing the mask either. I look forward to the day where we don't have to wear the mask. But if wearing a mask allows my children and your children to experience in-person learning, to experience the extracurricular activities that bond our school communities, then I'm going to do it for them. And then when it's time to take them off, I'll be happy to take them off. Right now, it's not that time.
And that teacher was unvaccinated as well, and that is one of the primary protections we can have as adults. And you talked about the suffering of students. You know, this pandemic has been so hard on the littlest ones in particular. There have been a lot of reports about children now leaving the school system altogether during the pandemic, just losing connection with school. How big of a problem is that? How worried are you about those kids and the kids who have shown deficits in their learning and the futures they might have?
Yeah. You know, we talk a lot about the digital divide. There was a relational divide that happened in this country, and it's our responsibility as educators and as leaders to make sure we're doing everything in our power to get students back in the classroom in front of their teachers, in front of their peers. And part of doing that is building confidence so that parents trust that the schools are safe. When we ban mask mandates, we're sending a message that your fears are not being taken into account. We know the spread of COVID happens when masks are not being used. So let's do everything in our power. We need to get those students back in because many times those are the students that really require the most support. It's all hands on deck to make sure we reclaim our school communities and we do it in a way that's safe.
Absolutely. The kids do need our support in so many ways. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Terry.
And that does it for the breakdown today. Thank you at home for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo.
And I'm Terry Moran. We'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.